actually keep these for any reason.
What, just,
Yeah.
how are you supposed to put them on your thingy?
What do you mean?
I don't know, your late exhibit? Did you turn in a late exhibit?
I already gave all the late
Or
exhibits.
just slap it on your late exhibit?
Why do I need one?
Or maybe you keep, I don't know.
All right, it is 6 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting for Wednesday, September 27, 2023. And I will ask for a roll call, please.
Zamora.
Here.
Harmon. Absent. Larson.
Here.
Boutros.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. So moving on in the agenda, is there any conflict of interest declarations anybody needs to report?
No.
Okay, seeing none, no special presentations, and we'll move on to item 5 of our agenda, which is our consent calendar, which has a few minutes from previous meetings to approve, to consider to approve. I didn't entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
There is a motion from Commissioner Larson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second for Commissioner Boutros. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, so we'll move on to our opening statement. This is the regularly scheduled meeting for the Planning and Zoning Commission. We serve both as a in a decision-making capacity and an advisory capacity for the mayor and city council. There are 2 types of public hearings that this commission conducts. The first is a legislative hearing whereby we formulate recommendations on certain land use requests. Our recommendations are then forwarded on to city council, who makes decisions on legislative matters. The second type of public hearing is quasi-judicial in nature, meaning that the requests are specific to the parcel of land. We are authorized to make decisions on requests for special use permits, variances, preliminary plat time extensions, and planned unit developments that do not involve the subdivision of land. However, any decision we may make tonight is by no means final. Anyone that believes he or she has been aggrieved by our decision has the right to file an appeal to the city council. On quasi-judicial requests that involve the subdivision of land, rezones, and annexations, we are authorized to only make recommendations to city council, who will make the decision. The hearing procedures as required by Idaho Code are as follows. First, the staff will present a report on the application. Second, the applicant or applicant's representative will then present the summary of the request, followed by third, which is testimony for those in support, will be taken, followed by testimony for those in a neutral position, followed by those in opposition. We will allow the applicant and applicant's representative rebuttal, and after the rebuttal, testimony is given, public testimony is closed, and no new oral or written testimony will be allowed unless the members vote to reopen testimony. Time limits would be 10 minutes for the applicant, 5 in favor, 5 neutral, 5 opposed, and 5 applicant rebuttal. We accept oral and written testimony from those in attendance, but only if they've signed up to signed the sign-up sheet to speak, available at the front of the room, and are sworn in. When testifying before us, you must come to the podium, state your full name and address, and acknowledge that you have been sworn in. We ask everyone to treat all parties with fairness and respect. We will not tolerate any outbursts, clapping, whistling, or booing or jeers. We will also ask everyone to drop their cell phones or a volunteer commission and receive small compensation for our efforts. We are charged by law to keep clear record of the proceeding, consider factual testimony, and stay within the city's and states' rules and regulations. We thank you for your courtesy to us and those and others as we move through this process. All right, that was a mouthful. So with that, we'll move on with the agenda to Section 6, which is old business. So it's action item. This action item is a public hearing, quasi-judicial case number ANN 2216, CPM 233, a request by ALC Architecture to annex parcel R3244 and 18.72 acre parcel of land at 5617 Cleveland Boulevard, located south of Ustick Road and west of North Midway on the north of the Nampa-Caldwell Boulevard corridor in Caldwell, Idaho, to include any adjacent right-of-ways with proposed split zoning of M1 light industrial on the north half of the property and C3 on the south half of the property closest to Caldwell Boulevard, to include the approval of a development agreement associated with ANN 2216. Concurrently, the applicant is requesting a comprehensive plan amendment on the northern half of the property from a CS commercial and service to an NP manufacturing and production land use designation, to include approval of resolution number 84-23 associated with CPM 23-3. The subject parcel is contiguous to the current City of Caldwell parcels to the west and east boundaries and is the last remaining infill parcel along this portion of Nampa Caldwell Boulevard. And with that, staff report, please.
All right, thank you, Commissioners. Waiting for my presentation. There you go. Perfect, okay. Thank you, Commissioners. Alex Jones, Associate Planner, 621 Cleveland Boulevard. Before you use Cleveland Flex, a annexation and comp plan amendment. Here we have the subject site location. The project location is an 18.72 acre parcel located at 5617 Cleveland Boulevard, and this site has frontage along Cleveland Boulevard. For conditions surrounding subject site, there is residential to the north, commercial to the east, commercial to the west, and commercial/residential to the south. For the applicant request, the applications before you tonight are for an annexation of the 18.72 acres of land into the Caldwell city limits and a comprehensive plan amendment of the northern portion of the parcel as shown in the blue square from commercial service to manufacturing and production. Currently, this is in the county. It is zoned in the county as commercial on the southern portion and M1 or light industrial on the top, which matches what the applicant is requesting tonight. The proposed development is surrounded by C3 to the south and east and M1 light industrial to the north, east, and west. For comprehensive plan analysis, most surrounding areas are commercial service. The site is also commercial service, is what the comp plan amendment is to make this manufacturing and production on the northern portion. The proposed development provides a mix of industrial and commercial buildings. A development agreement is proposed to limit permitted uses on the parcel. The proposed development project has been analyzed for compliance with city codes and policy, and staff finds that the development is in compliance with all parking and landscape requirements. It is in compliance with all bulk standards for lot sizes, setbacks, frontages, and height of buildings. It will have adequate site access, utilities, and services to the site, and is in compliance with all other zoning ordinances. Staff received comments from Compass. They showed no concerns with this development, and we received no public comments. In the draft development agreement shown to you in our staff report, there are some changes that need to be made after speaking with the applicant. In the draft EA, it currently has equipment sales and rentals as non-permitted in the C3. We want to change it to permitted. This is already an outright permitted use in the land use table. Bank credit union with drive-through or no drive-through is changed to permitted C3 zoning. Beauty shop changed to permitted on the C3. And both kinds of drinking establishments changed to special use on the C3 pieces. All these changes will match the current land use. Currently, the development agreement is only to prohibit other uses that would not work with the applicant's desires for the parcel. Staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval of the request, that such request is subject to the conditions as specified in the FCOs. I stand for questions.
Thank you. Just real quick, so this parcel is surrounded by Caldwell? Is that how I'm understanding this?
Correct.
Okay.
On all sides.
Okay, thank you. Any,
I have one. On page 100 of the PDF that was sent out, it's the finding of fact page. That page refers to this as CPM 23-6, but as noted, this is CPM 23-3, so that typo should be corrected before it goes to City Council.
That is correct. That will be corrected before it goes to council. Thank you.
Thank you, and good catch. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and call up the representative, Jeff Likes. Please state your name and address into the record, please.
Jeff Likes, 1119 East State Street, Eagle, Idaho, 83616. We don't have a lot to say except we appreciate staff doing their report. We're in agreement with everything. And so I'll stand for questions from you guys if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Likes. Any questions for the applicant?
Chair,
Commissioner Larson?
do you guys have a vision of what your guys are going for? What types of usages you're gonna build in there?
We do, can you, I think about 3 slides. Yeah, there we go. So currently on the slide, the back portion, which is the M portion, the light industrial portion, that's gonna be more flex space type uses back there, and then some more retail type uses up along Caldwell Boulevard.
Okay,
We don't have any tenants yet,
okay.
but yeah,
Just buying and selling businesses is the goal?
right.
Retail, okay.
Thank you. Other questions? All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. No one else has signed up, and that was the applicant, so if there's no further comments, I would entertain a motion to close public testimony.
So moved.
There's a motion from Commissioner Boutros and a second from Commissioner Larson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So now, public testimony is closed, and now it's time for us to dialogue.
So when I looked at the application, it looks like it's a vacant lot that's going to be used for light industrial and commercial. I looked at all of the permitted and not permitted activities that are shown in the table in the package. We've seen slight change. There's nothing that changes the basic character of the application. It looked okay. This looks like a pretty reasonable thing to approve.
On the basic same page. The only thing I would ask is to just not have it be storage units. Other than that, I think, and that would be because I don't feel like that complies with what the goal of what I think that should be doing, so.
Yeah. I think I don't know if we can.
Yeah, I don't know that we can, but that's,
Condition that, but certainly, yeah.
yeah, that's the only
Application
suggestion that I would say. Because all the other stuff, I think, we have a lot of storage units in Caldwell, so if we could do businesses, that would be fantastic. Super supportive of that.
And I agree with the general sentiment. It just makes sense considering the space and what's there, so.
Yeah, because this one qualifies, that's the only reason I'm bringing it up.
Okay. All right. If there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion to take action.
I will do so. I'll make a motion for approval. So, based upon the testimony and evidence in record in this matter and upon the findings of fact and conclusions of law set forth herein, do hereby determine and move as follows. The request CPM 23-3 for a comprehensive plan map amendment on the southern portion of the subject parcel from commercial service to manufacturing and production to include approval of resolution number 84-23 is recommended for approval subject to the conditions of approval as presented or amended, and the request for ANN 22-16 for an annexation of parcel R3244 with a zoning designation of M1 light industrial and C3 service commercial is recommended for approval subject to the conditions of approval as presented or amended.
Okay. There was a motion from Commissioner Boutros. There's a second?
Second.
Second for Commissioner Larson. All right, we've had our discussion, so with that, roll call, please.
Boutros.
Yes.
Larson.
Yes.
Zamora.
Yes. All right, well, now we're done with that one, so I'll close the public hearing for that specific item, and we'll move on to item 7 of new business on our agenda. And the first item is a public hearing, so I'll open that public hearing to address case number CPM 23-8, CUP 23-12, ZON 23-7. Riley Planning Services, on behalf of Doug Clegg, is requesting a comprehensive plan land use map amendment from LDR, low density residential, to HDR, high density residential, to include approval of resolution number 168-23 associated with CPM 23-8, a rezone from R1 low density residential to R3 high density residential, and a special use permit for Lenity Apartments Phase 2, a multifamily development with 180 units and and 11 attached residential units consisting of 3 triplex units and 1 duplex unit. The approximately 10.24 acre parcel R325501200 is located at the south terminus of Lenity Living Avenue, approximately 600 feet south of Ustick Road and 1,000 feet east of the intersection between Ustick Road and Montana Avenue in Caldwell, Idaho. And so with that, staff report, please.
Thank you, Commissioners. Katie Wright, Associate Planner, 621 Cleveland Boulevard. Before you is Lenity Living, or 2, sorry, wrong one, that one. Is Lenity Living 2, CPM 2308, ZON 2307, and SUP 2312. There is a late exhibit that has been provided, which is an updated landscape plan. The project location is 8.53 acre parcel located southwest corner of Montana Avenue and Ustick Road below Lenity Living 1. The site will have frontage along Lenity Living Avenue, which will be moving south or north to south through the development. The project site is currently surrounded by commercial and residential to the north, single-family to the south, single-family and agriculture to the west, and single-family and agriculture to the east. I apologize. I'm not really sure. Okay. The application before you tonight are comprehensive plan amendments of 8.53 acres from low-density residential to high-density residential, a rezone of 8.53 acres of land from R1 and C2 to R3, and a special use permit to allow multifamily residential and triplexes within the R3 zone. In 2006, the site was annexed into the city with a zoning designation of low-density residential and community commercial. This was annexed into the city with the parcel to the north, has been subdivided since, and was developed as the first phase of the Lenity Living development. This was during the time when multifamily was allowed within the commercial zones. This application is asking to continue the development that was always intended for this site. The site to the north will be sharing amenities with this development and will be consists of 4 apartment buildings and an assisted living building. Tonight's request consists of applicant's proposal for a rezone from low-density residential and community commercial to high-density residential zoning designation. The purpose of the R3 is to provide areas by zoning procedures in accordance with the comprehensive plan that provide locations for medium to high-density residential development at a density consistent with the comprehensive plan. This type of zoning pattern is intended to provide transition or buffer areas between commercial uses and lower intensive uses, and to provide places for higher density uses in selected places of the city's neighborhoods. The proposed development is surrounded by low density residential, community commercial, medium density, and high density residential. This is providing a transition zone from the commercial to the north and the low density residential to the south. The proposed comp plan designation and development is proposed to be high density residential and is consistent with the intent of the comprehensive plan, and the proposed densities are in compliance with the comprehensive plan. The proposed land use is a mix of uses consisting of multifamily, multiplexes, and a daycare. Triplexes and multifamily are especially permitted uses within the R3 zoning designation district. The applicant is proposing a development consistent of 180 multifamily units, 3 triplexes, and a duplex. There will also be a clubhouse with a pool and a daycare. These will help serve phase 1 as well. The proposed development project has been analyzed for compliance with city codes and policies and staff fines. The proposed development is in compliance with all parking and landscaping requirements, is in compliance with all bulk standards for lot size, setbacks, frontage, and heights of buildings. The proposed planned unit development proposed development will have adequate site access, utilities, and services to the site, and the proposed development is in compliance with the zoning and ordinances. Public agencies were notified and asked to provide comments, and no agencies voiced concern. There were, 2 public comments, and then an additional email that was sent later on that I will read into the record. The first comment was from Lynette Hansel, a resident in the development to the south, and this was in opposition because she said she'd rather have houses than apartment buildings. And then the second public comment was from Dustin Bentley, a resident also to the south. This letter was in opposition of the development because of the loss of privacy, decrease in property value, and the lack of appropriate infrastructure for this area. And then the email that was received was a letter of support from Tom Manschreck, which states, to whom it may concern, an affiliate of Thomas Development Company owns Norfolk Apartments, a 78-unit development or family affordable apartment community currently under construction at 2301 Chicago. The developer of the apartment community at 3905 South Indian Avenue, Miriam LLC, and Principal Doug Clegg have impeccable integrity and business ethics, with whom Thomas Development Co. has purchased 2 affordable housing sites upon which we have constructed 48-unit senior apartment communities, one located in Caldwell, the other in Fruitland. Thomas Development Co. and Norfolk Apartments support all 3 of these these land use actions, and know Mr. Clegg will deliver a top quality development in the city of Caldwell. If any questions, please contact me. Sincerely, Thomas Development, signed, Thomas Manschreck. The site-specific conditions, the applicant shall provide an updated landscape plan showing the 10-foot buffer, which they have done, so that can be stricken when you guys decide to make a motion. The applicant shall, or the development will be maintained by a property manager, and then the applicant shall receive approval for a lot split application, splitting the lot and dedicating right-of-way to the city of Caldwell prior to issuance of a building permit. Staff recommends that if council approves the request, that such request is subject to the conditions as specified in the findings of facts, conclusions of law, and order of decision. And I stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Yes.
Commissioner Boutros.
The site location calls out the southwest corner on Montana and Ustick, but that's not what the map shows. The outlined location is on Whitefish Lake Street and Indian Springs Street, south of Lenity Living Avenue. So I believe you read from the legal description, and so that appears to be incorrect as well. That needs to be fixed.
Commissioners, that's just an approximation to point out where it is. There is a map that's typically included, so they have a better idea of where it's located, but I do understand we can adjust and make it more specific for you.
I appreciate that. The plan is to route apartment traffic south through an R1 residential area, and it calls out that a cross-access agreement is mentioned as a future agreement. I'm curious why that cross-access agreement has not been achieved and isn't in this package.
Commissioners, so I have talked with the applicant, and based on our earlier review, we did mention that that would be potentially needed. It is no longer needed. Those are all public roads, so that's not necessary.
Other questions for staff? Commissioner Larson?
Yeah, just to clarify, so you're saying that they have phase 1 is on the top, on the north portion?
Commissioners, yes, so they have come through clearly as separate. The top one's already constructed. This is essentially the second part of the top one.
Okay, so, sorry, Ramsey, just finished my thought here. So on the zoning there, it says business, so it feels a little misleading to say it's going from business to not business. So when did the code adjust that you said that it changed?
Yeah, Commissioner Larson, I do not have a specific date of when that changed, but I want to say it was somewhat recently.
Okay.
So when they did come through with that original plan, that multifamily was allowed to be in the commercial zones, and our code no longer reads that way. So that's why they are proposing what they're proposing now.
Okay.
Okay, do you have more questions, Commissioner Boutros?
Not for staff, maybe later.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for staff? If not, we'll ask the applicant to come up. And is that Maria? Or is that Marla? Excuse me, I thought that was a...
No, Penelope Constantakis with Riley Planning Service, representing Doug Clegg. Post Office Box 405, Boise, 83701. Commissioner, I'll get to your question about the traffic routing in a few minutes. So as you know, the applications before you this evening are for a special use permit, a comprehensive plan map change, and a rezone. A follow-up administrative application will be done to facilitate the lot split for the public road that will be going through the site. And the development agreement does provide instructions regarding additional landscaping for buffering along Lenity Living Avenue and a design review by the development manager to check our aesthetics. So you have received a new landscape plan that has the change to 10-foot wide landscape buffer along the south. The design of the site and architecture were very carefully considered by the architect and developer and include a heightened consideration of ADA standards. Attention to ADA access is incorporated into the site, which includes residences and all of the site amenities. The site density will be slightly less than 9 units an acre, while R3 allows up to 25. The site design is focused on central amenities of the pool, community building, and the residential-only daycare for both phases of the apartments as well as the employees of the Aspen Creek Assisted Living Facility. The project team believes that Lenity Apartments Phase 2 with apartments and dedicated over 55 units will continue to be an asset for the city of Caldwell by providing additional residential living choices in close proximity to a broad range of services within easy walking and biking distance. Biking and walking to close-by services keeps vehicles off the street, and it reduces trip distance as well as improves the overall health of the community. Phase 2 is in an area of Caldwell where a very substantial portion of leasing opportunities are for single-family residential homes. Renting a single-family home and all of the associated costs and responsibilities are either not desired or not economically possible for all residents. A variety of housing, including over 55 single-level units, is needed to provide for a variety of residents. Folks who choose apartment communities value and use amenities such as the weight room, the pool, and the walking paths, and these are higher priorities for some residents for their choice in living arrangements. Consideration and care for the residential neighbors to the south is provided with single-level units along the south side of the site, and there is at least a 180-foot separation between the south property line of our site and the taller buildings. Phase 1 is complete with the reopening of Montana after utility work closure and USIC was closed for intersection improvements. The leasing activity is ongoing. According to the property manager, the demographics of the new residents are 10% singles, 80% couples between the ages of 25 and 35, and 10% are families with children. A substantial number of remote workers were also noted by the property manager. The standard for unit size distribution is generally 25, 50, 25. So we have about 25% one bedroom, one bath, 50% two bedroom, two bath, and 25% three bedroom, two bath. With the rise of remote working opportunities, the need for spare bedroom is becoming more important. As Katie mentioned, the amenities will be shared with both phases. A full list of amenities was provided in the project description, but I would be happy to cover those for you if you wish. The regional path system is immediately adjacent to the east side of the site, and the pedestrian connectivity within Phase 2 will provide convenient access to that pathway. I would like to note that the reason that there is that really wide swath of land to the east of us available for that regional pathway is because the developer of this site donated the land to the city of Caldwell for that pathway. The 6-foot perimeter fence is planned and will provide privacy, especially for the adjacent single-family homes. As I've referenced, the units along the south boundary are single level. The separation of these townhouse-style units with garages on the south side include a 6-foot fence, a 10-foot wide landscape buffer, 21-foot wide drive aisle, and a 7-foot wide sidewalk before you get to the face of the garage. There's no backyard for the units that are next to the south boundary, so there'll be no backyarding that is occurring side to side. The only interaction from will be from the residents entering or exiting their garages about 39 feet away from the south property line, which then if you add in their rear setbacks, it's quite a bit more. The property owner and developer and architect endeavored to exceed the City of Caldwell standards, including parking and the generous assortment of recreational opportunities. The site exceeds the parking standard by at least 27%, with a total of 357 spaces, and that includes the townhouses, the apartments, ADA, the clubhouse parking, and the daycare. There will be 94 bike parking slots that are also included in the design and help foster alternative or non-vehicle mobility opportunities. With a regional pathway immediately adjacent to the site, alternative mobility becomes a real option. The fire department was consulted, and the site layout incorporates all of their standards and needs for providing emergency services. This is where I'm going to get to the trip generation and the distribution. The full traffic impact study was submitted and reviewed by the city. The engineering comments include an $80,000 contribution, which is a proportionate share of an intersection upgrade, and I assume that the City of Caldwell will decide where to use those dollars. There is detailed information in the TIS about the distribution of trips entering and exiting, and the assigned percentage for the Laster Lane and Montana Avenue trips. Those are the southbound trips that would travel through the single-family residential area, is estimated at 10%, which is pretty low. Most of it will go north because they will have a public street connection all the way northward to USIC. Connectivity with the bonus of better distribution of vehicle trips over more streets lessens the clustering of vehicles and facilitates better functioning of Caldwell streets. If the Commission would like more details on the TIS, I would be happy to provide those. I have a copy of that with me. Engineering comments also reference mail delivery and an appropriate bus stop to be located. The project team will work with the Postal Service and the school district to finalize those details. The role of the SUP is to look at benefits and impacts. Those are usually listed as damage, hazard, nuisance, and detriment. Provision of facilities on and off site, and project support in the comprehensive plan. The staff report provides a detailed analysis of how Lenity Apartments 2 is in conformance, it's compatible, it's compliant, and it meets all the codes, regulations, and policies of the City of Caldwell. All impacts have been addressed with site design mitigation and contribution to the restructure of an appropriate, and contribution to the intersection fund with an appropriate amount. Hopefully I've provided you with enough details and information that you require. Property owner and project team have reviewed the staff report and concur with staff's findings, although there were a few small and minor details that probably need a little bit of clarification. The continuation of Lenity Apartments with Phase 2 will provide good quality residential opportunities in this quadrant of Caldwell, which has mostly single-family homes for rent. And proximity to off-site recreation facilities such as the YMCA, shopping, schools, and services will benefit the community. With that, I'd be happy to address any of your comments or concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from commissioners?
I have a question. One of my concerns in reviewing the packet was the transition from the R1 residential to the south up to the current set of apartments that are in the first phase of Lenity Living. It was interesting that you noted the southernmost apartments are single-story. Could we see elevations of the southernmost apartments in Phase 2?
I imagine, and just so you know, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, just so you know, the only thing, the garages are the only thing that are on the south face of those townhouse-style units. They're in triplex and duplex configurations. So there's just there'll be no opportunity for any kind of noise or disruption that would come from the townhouses to the north.
So there are potentially still issues associated with the break in the skyline by these structures. There are no elevations available for these?
Commissioner Boutros, I believe, it's in our packet I'm seeing elevations on page, like 156 of the PDF.
Yeah.
And I'm just scrolling through to see. Yeah.
That looks like single-story structure.
Commissioners, I can send those over to Noah, to get them to put up on the screen.
Thank you.
They should be in the packets. They would be,
Yeah, it's a matter of scrolling through and finding them in a reasonable time.
Are they on page 160?
I apologize, we have different numbering.
Yeah, that appears to be the triplex on the side.
It says on the side, triplex,
Yeah.
underneath the 55 plus housing,
Mm-hmm.
it should say triplex.
So that is page 160 of the PDF.
Mr. Chairman?
So are we looking at a,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, are we looking at a single-story, 3 residential unit building? Yes, yeah, we're looking at the same thing.
And that's that's page 160 of the PDF.
That is page 160.
Thank you.
Additional questions?
I had a question about the daycare. Is the daycare open to the public or only open to the
It's,
residents?
it's, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, it's available for the residents in Phase 1 and Phase 2, and also for the staff at the assisted living facility that's to the north at Aspen Creek.
Okay.
They were actually, I had my neighborhood meeting at the assisted living facility, and the staff were very excited about that. Most of them are young people with children.
Okay.
Thank you. Additional questions for Penelope? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the only other person who signed up is Marla Carson, but signed not to speak. So with that, seeing as there's no further discussion and probably no need for a rebuttal, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to close public testimony.
Before we do that, I would like to ask staff a question for some clarification.
Go ahead.
So I want to be sure that I understood the testimony correctly, that the special use permit pertains to revising the allowable buildings to be consistent with what was done before the law was changed. Is that correct?
Chairman and Commissioner, the special use permit would be to strictly allow for the multifamily buildings to be on this parcel, along with the triplexes that are along the southern portion. But this development is in conjunction with the one to the north.
So before the law changed, would we have needed a special use permit for this?
My understanding is yes.
Even so?
It still would have needed one. It was outright permitted? Chair and Commissioners, I stand corrected. Sometimes history can be against you. So, based on what I've been told, it was outright permitted, and they did not need a special use permit for that.
Okay, so that was my understanding of the testimony tonight, and I am reminded of a previous application where we had a similar situation occur. All right, thank you.
Of course.
Any additional questions before we close public testimony? If not, I'd entertain a motion to close public testimony.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion by Commissioner Boutros, second for Commissioner Larson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we've closed public testimony, now it's time for us to dialogue.
Okay. So
Go ahead.
there are a lot of there are a lot of housing units in this development. Within the realm of similar developments, what was done here to manage the skyline by putting single-story buildings on the southernmost side is good. And it kind of mitigates some of this. The remaining issues are going to pertain to traffic. That was addressed, and the traffic impact study appears to have indicated it's going to be an acceptable amount of traffic.
Yeah. I guess my initial take, I think that the product is very good. I guess what I'm trying to reconcile, and I love other commissioners' thoughts is really around the comprehensive plan amendment and kind of this idea of transition. I'm looking at, what the comprehensive plan is and the current the current designations, and I recognize that we say that high density residential serves as a transition, but I'm not. It seems like an abrupt transition because it goes from low density, and there is medium to the west of that. When I look at the map that I'm looking at now, which was one of the screens with the comprehensive plan, there is high density nearby, but not adjacent. So I'm struggling just with that, the appropriateness of the transition from low density to this higher density.
So I also struggled with that, and the view for the R1 neighbors to the south is not going to be substantially different whether we required R1 housing in the southern part of this development or left it as single-story triplexes.
That's true.
Their view is essentially the same. So my initial thought when I read the package was we should be looking for medium density at the top, at the northern part of this, and R1 on the south. But there's no practical difference with regard to what the neighbors are seeing, I think. If there were neighbors here and they wanted to offer testimony on that, I'd love to hear it, but we don't have that. So we have to go on our best estimate of what that visual skyline is going to look like.
Well, I may ask staff I'm trying to find it really quickly, but what is the density of this development? I know it's here, I just can't find it quickly.
Isn't it 9 something?
Chairman, the density is 8.75 dwelling units per acre.
And
on the lower end of density.
The allowed would be up to 25 dwelling units.
And R2 is 4.
Yeah.
So.
I'm
on the same page as both of you guys, that it felt, up until knowing that the business piece is not business because of us changing code, that feels more peaceable for the north piece, because it feels like a transition. It does feel kind of sudden to go from R3 to R1. So, although I think they did do a good job, those single-story homes does feel like a middle ground, but it is a little sudden.
Well, I'm certainly appreciating this dialogue. I think I'm leaning more towards my personal vote being in favor of this because the density is lower, and some of the questions that were asked, and just certainly there's a plethora of information, so it's good to call out some of the elevations specifically. Other dialogue?
My only concern here, and I don't want to sound mean, but I drive by this and these front apartments look okay. And so we can't ask them to make this next phase look really nice, because then phase 1 looks bad. So, my goal would be the next group when we have a phase one to ask them to make phase one look a little bit nicer, because I don't think it's fair for us to do that to them, to make them change phase two a bunch, because phase one was already approved, so. That's my only concern as someone who lives nearby.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, the part of phase one, the assisted living, is the one that's closest to USTIC, and that is not multi-story, if I recall correctly.
I think it's 2 or 3 right along USTIC.
No, I don't. Yeah. I go by there every day, and I
I'm
think
not
the
sure.
assisted living is single story.
Got it.
So, insofar as this, are we at a place where somebody's, at a point where they would like to make a motion?
You should do it so that you have to do the reading.
Sure,
Mm-hmm.
I'll do it.
Commissioner Larson, you have a motion?
Where is it here? Action item,
That's the number one under it.
yeah, public hearing quasi-judicial case number CMP 23-8, zone 23-7, SUP 23-12, based upon the testimony, evidence, and record of this matter, and upon the finding of facts and conclusions of law set forth herein, to hereby determine and move as follow the requested CMP 23-8 for the comprehensive plan amendment on the subject parcel from low density to high density residential to include approval of resolution 168-23 is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions of approval as present amended, and the request for zone 23-8 to rezone parcel R3255501200 from R1 low density residential and C2 community commercial to R3 high density residential is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions of approval as presented/amended, and the request for SUP 23-12 to allow for multifamily and triplexes within the R3 high density residential zone is approved, subject to the conditions of approval as presented and amended.
Thank you, Commissioner Larson. So there's a motion. Is there a second?
One moment, with the removal of the condition pertaining to the landscaping, because that was updated and included.
28, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
That said, seconded.
And so you're applying that to your initial?
Yeah, based on the amendment, because that would be an amendment.
Perfect,
Yeah.
thank you. And so with that, that's your second, Commissioner Boutros?
Yes.
All right, so there is a motion and a second, and with that, roll call, please.
Larson.
Yes.
Boutros.
Yes.
Zamora.
Yes. Okay, all right, well, with that, I'll close public hearing for that item, and then we'll move on our agenda to our second new business, which is which I'll open public hearing. It's public hearing, quasi-judicial case number CPM 23-4, ZON 23-4, PUD 23-1, SUB 23-3, NV5 on behalf of Viper Investment LLC is requesting a comprehensive plan, land use map amendment from MDR medium density residential to HC highway corridor, and a rezone from R2 medium density residential to HC highway corridor for approximately 39.039 acres of the northern portion of parcel R3430901200 adjacent to Highway 2026 to include approval of resolution number 97-23 associated with CPM 23-4 and a development agreement associated with ZON 23-4. Concurrently, the applicant is requesting approval for a planned unit development and a preliminary plat for parcel R3430901200, approximately 75.02 acres, and R34297010B0, approximately 43.47 acres for a mixed-use development, Escalon Park, within a proposed split zone of R1 low-density residential and HC highway corridor, consisting of 9 commercial lots totaling 38.15 acres, including right-of-way, 60 common lots, and 1 road lot, 240 single-family residential lots, and 1 apartment lot. The development is proposing a total of 430, That's 432 dwelling units with a density of 5.37 dwelling units per acre. The subject parcels are located on the south side of Highway 2026 between Middleton Road and Midland Boulevard in Caldwell, Idaho. With that, staff report, please.
Thank you, Commissioners. Katie Wright, Associate Planner, 621 Cleveland Boulevard. Before you is Escalon Park, CPM 2304, ZON 2304, PUD 2301, and SUB 2313. The project location is 118.49 acre parcels located south of Highway 2026 between Middleton Road and Midland Boulevard. The site has frontage along Highway 2026 and when connected will have frontage along Santa Ana and Skyway. The project site is currently surrounded by single-family residential and some commercial. The development to the east is Valencia Village and was approved to include commercial along Highway 2026 and residential to mirror this development. That project came through with the intention of this falling behind. The applications before you tonight are for a comprehensive plan amendment for the northern 39.039 acres from low-density residential to highway corridor, which is shown in the blue. A rezone of the same 39.039 acres of land from R1 to highway corridor, again shown in blue. A mixed-use PUD for all 118.49 acres, which is outlined in red, and a preliminary plat for subdivision for both parcels outlined in red as well. In 2006, this site was annexed into the city with the zoning designation of low-density residential. There were no original plans for these annexations that staff was able to find. In 2022, Valencia Village, a planned unit development to the west, was approved. This development would connect and serve the development as was the original intent. There will be compatible zoning and uses between the two developments based on what is being proposed. And I apologize, in pink is the approved development to the west. Tonight's request consists of the applicant's proposal for a rezone and a comprehensive plan amendment from R1 and low-density residential to highway corridor zoning and future land use designation. The purpose of highway corridor zone is to create, preserve, and enhance key areas along a highway corridor which are highly visible or transitional in nature by developing, maintaining, and expanding highway-oriented commercial uses, limited light industrial uses, educational uses, offices, and high-density residential uses. The proposed development is surrounded by highway corridor to the west, medium-density residential to the south, county zoning to the east, and county to the north. I apologize. The proposed comp plan designation and development is highway corridor for the northern 39.039 acres, and the remainder will stay the same as medium-density residential and low-density residential, which is consistent with the intent of the comprehensive plan, and the proposed densities are in compliance with the comprehensive plan. This development consists of 9 lots of commercial, 192 units of multifamily apartments, and 240 single-family homes detached. There is proposed flexibility for some of the single-family home internal setbacks being 5 feet rather than 6, some lots with less frontage than 50 feet, and the multifamily buildings being 40 feet high. Besides the flexibility request, the proposed development has been analyzed for compliance with city codes and policies, and staff finds the proposed development is in compliance with all parking and landscaping requirements, is in compliance with all bulk standards for lot size, setbacks, frontage, and height of buildings. The planned unit development is in compliance for all size, land use, design, and amenity requirements. The proposed development will have adequate site access, utilities, and services to serve the site, and the proposed development is in compliance with all other zoning and subdivision ordinances. Public agencies were notified and asked to provide comments. The only agency that had concerns was Compass, saying they want traffic calming measures to be considered to discourage speeding along Santa Ana which would be running north to south through this development. And Economic Development submitted a letter in favor of this project due to the diversity of housing options in the commercial that will help fill the retail leakage gaps. We received one public comment from John Bottles with Mark Bottles Real Estate Services, and this letter is in support of the development, states that the real estate firm has been working with many businesses that want to locate at this site, including grocery stores and other large retailers. For site-specific conditions, the applicant shall provide a secondary access or proposed fire suppression systems for Phase 6 before pulling building permits. Electric vehicle parking and bike parking shall be provided if applicable according to Caldwell City Code at time of development up for the commercial uses. At build-out, all parking requirements shall be considered 2 to 3 off-street spaces for single-family homes, 1.5 to 2 spaces per unit for multifamily, additional 1 space per every 4 residential lots with frontage below 45 feet provided in a parking lot immediately adjacent to the lots, and commercial spaces will be dependent on use. Staff recommends that if approved, that such request is subject to the conditions as specified in the findings of facts, conclusions of law, and order of decision. And I stand for questions.
Thank you. I'll start with a question. My one question is, in the letter from Canyon Highway District Number 4, they made a request, I was just looking at it, that the city require a traffic signal serving Midland 2026 intersection should be functioning prior to issuance of building permits for the residential lots proposed by this application. Has that been considered, or is that in the application? Or in the report?
Chairman Rob may be able to answer that a little better.
Mr. Chairman, the intent there is the Midland and 2026 intersection is very let's just say it's at capacity and it's not a safe intersection. Yeah. The intent really here is that I don't know what their timing is on the phasing, and maybe the applicant can speak to this, but I know that Canyon Highway District 4 feels very strongly that there should be a traffic light at that intersection before any traffic is pushed in that direction. In as much as traffic can be pushed in a different direction, or at what point they're going to have connectivity out to that location, I'm not sure. And that all kind of depends on how the site's phased, on where traffic's going to be going initially, but it is a bad intersection, and I know ITD at some point in the future is planning to put a signal there. And if I understand correctly, they're in design for this portion of 2026, and so there could be a signal built there within the next couple of years potentially. But I don't necessarily disagree with that comment by Canyon Highway District 4.
Thank you.
So I also made note of the Canyon Highway District 4 letter about the failure, they described it as a failure of the 2026 and Midland intersection. I wrote down a question: are the necessary mitigations in any plan, and are they funded? That I think everyone recognizes how bad that intersection is. My neighbor was the first person at the recent fatality to get to the victim, and that brings it in a more personal way. It would be nice if we were able to point to specific plans that include the necessary remediation for that intersection before we go approving additional traffic that is going to use that. There will be more fatalities. I had a question for staff. On page 245 of our packet, which is titled Areas of Special Concern, there was a note about either possibly providing secondary access for Phase 6 or possibly providing a fire suppression system. I would like to see that changed to definitely require secondary access rather than a fire suppression system. We, as a commission, have not seen anything that works around inadequate access by providing a fire suppression system so far. That's new information for us. I think we would want a thorough briefing on the adequacy of such a system, and we, of course, we have not received such a briefing. It's more conventional to have secondary access, and I think I'd like to see that.
So I guess to what I'm hearing your question, and I'm asked, so is that conditioned, that secondary access conditioned in this?
Chairman and Commissioners, the fire department and the applicant have talked at length about different options. The portion that kind of sticks out over to the east is the area of concern. And I'm sure the applicant can talk a little bit more about this as well. A lot has kind of gone into all of the phasing thoughtfully to try and think about how this would work best, since all of those parcels around it are not owned by the applicant, making it so all of those would need to be developed prior to them being able to get a secondary access right there. So that's just a little bit of the history for the conversations that we've had with that situation. It's just kind of a tricky situation, so I understand where you're coming from.
Okay,
we'll see if the applicant maybe has a response to that shortly. Any other questions for staff?
I have one, Chair, if I could jump in. Can you guys provide us the city transportation master plan? Because it said on page 242 that this preliminary plat is consistent with that. And I looked and I couldn't find that anywhere. And so I was wondering, and when I found one, it said it's not finished being made. So is there information for that?
Chair and Commissioners, to my understanding right now, we're using the Compass functional map, but Rod may have more information.
Yeah, thank you. Chairman, Commissioners, the map that we use for our transportation plan is the adopted Compass map, and that shows that there are streets basically every half mile. You have your mile streets and your half mile streets. The city is in the process now of completing a citywide transportation master plan that is currently out for public comment, and so you're welcome to go review that online now and add your public comments so we can get that plan wrapped up. But this is generally consistent with our master plan, where Santa Ana is a collector road, and they have Santa Ana going down the center of their project, and then they have I think that's Skyway that goes through the middle, kind of where that roundabout is. And so it meets the master plan of the transportation system and the road classification map. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So it's mostly type, not capacity?
Yeah, so all of the let's just say all of the classified roads are designated to be able to handle the capacity at full build-out. And so those roads, Santa Ana is a collector, Skyway is a collector, but then you have Middleton Road, which is a principal arterial. You have Midland, which is also being developed as a principal arterial, and so the system's already established, and they're just simply complying with what we have told them and what has been adopted by Compass's, what is shown on Compass's map, which has been adopted by the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions for staff?
Maybe later.
Okay. You reserve the right for later. All right, with that, I'll ask the applicant. We have Bonnie Layton. Please come on up and provide your report for no more than 10 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman Zamora and Commissioners, for your time this evening. My name is Bonnie Layton. I'm with NV5. My address is 690 South Industry Way, Meridian, Idaho, Suite 10. I want to thank you tonight for your time, and also with staff's time during this application process. As Katie mentioned, we've been working with staff to really resolve some issues and concerns that have continued to come up, and believe that we've got a great project in addition to the city of Caldwell. So on behalf of Trilogy Development, Viper Investments, I'm here this evening to request your approval for our comp plan map amendment, a partial rezone, PUD, and preliminary plat for Escalon Park mixed-use development. There we go. So the first slide is just to, again, orient you where the project is located. As you can see in the upper right corner, Escalon Park is surrounded on the south, the west, and the east by properties that are already annexed into the city. Valencia Village, which was recently annexed and approved about a year ago, I would say maybe at the most, is to our west, and this project ties into that. Let's see, on our northern boundary, we have Highway 2026 that has pretty good direct access out to Interstate 84. Oops, that does go quick. This is just an enlargement of that to identify for you what is going on with the comprehensive plan map in the area. As Katie mentioned, this property was originally annexed in the early 2000s. At that point, when the comp plan map amendment or comp plan map designations were done, I'm not sure why this didn't get a designation of highway corridor. It seems kind of like it was a holdover from the previous zoning. However, you can tell that on both sides of our northern portion of this property is highway corridor. It would make sense and seem reasonable that adjacent to the Highway 2026, the northern portion of our site, could become highway corridor and be consistent with what's going on either side of it. As I mentioned, our southern boundary is Highway 2026. We're about 2 miles from the interchange. Of course, we're in close proximity to North Ranch Business Park and Sky Ranch, so a lot of employment opportunities in the area. Middleton Road is the main collector, as well as Midland Road. As you heard Rob mention, Skyway will intersect the center of our site. But really, this is an area of growth for the city, and we've worked with staff as well as planning staff and economic development. You heard that there was a letter from Mark Bottles. There's a lot of interest in growing commercial and services out in this area, and our project supports that as well. Let's see. So I've rotated this. North is to the left. So what you'll see is our site plan where we've got a mix of housing types. So on our northern portion of the site are the commercial area that's consistent with some commercial area to the west in Valencia Village. We have the, let me just get there really quickly. Move through this. Let's see. So we've got the Madden Spur drain that kind of creates an east-west boundary between our commercial. It's a nice buffer area that moves into our multifamily portion of our site. And then from there, we transition into the narrower lots, the alley-loaded townhomes, as well as, or the alley-loaded lots, as well as the front-loaded lots. Those have narrower frontages, pardon me. So we have additional parking areas dispersed throughout the site in that area to comply with the additional parking that is required per code for those narrower lots. And then we transition over to our east, which is moving up on the page with larger lots. Santa Ana will be a main collector. We've got a roundabout there that's all part of the design and master transportation plan for the area. We've got the Moses Drain that runs along our western boundary. We'll have landscaping and pathways consistent with the requirements of the city, as well as, maintenance and in compliance with the irrigation district's requirements. Overall, this site plan, as Katie mentioned, we have 432 dwelling units. with a density of 5.37 dwelling units per acre. 6 is the maximum that is allowed. We have 21 alley-loaded lots, 102 lots that are 36 wide patio home lots, and 117 single-family lots. So again, a great mix of product for the community. Let's see. Oops. Along with that, of course, we've got, we comply with the, hello? Okay. Along with that, we comply with the open spaces. There's actually a lot more open space in this project than we're able to count as qualified open space because of the irrigation areas running through the site that will still be an amenity to the community and the residents in the area. If that, oh, here we go. So phasing plan is, as Katie mentioned, Valencia Village is to the west. That's an approved project. That's where the development will start. We worked really closely with engineering and with the fire department in terms of phasing for this project. There was some concern about access points and making sure that fire had a couple of different access points to get to various areas of this project to serve it if there was a fire that broke out. So part of phase 1, as you will see, is the purple, starts kind of in the center of our site and includes the development, the continuation of Skyway from Valencia Village over to the roundabout, and then also north, the Santa Ana Avenue all the way up to Highway 2026. So that was really important for fire to make sure that we've got that access point. We agreed with them, and then we move into phase 2, which is to the west of that. Phase 3, which is the multifamily. Phase 4, which is the purple, and then phase 5 down at our most southern boundary. Phase 6, we are in agreement with staff, so we recognize that right now there is just one access point into phase 6, and that's based on fire code compliance. We understand that in order to build out phase 6, we will either need to provide a secondary access point to that phase, or those homes will have to be sprinkled, and we are in agreement with that. So we thank staff again and the fire department.
Say that I missed, or the homes will have to be what?
Sprinkled, like have fire sprinklers.
Yes, got it.
So this build out will take, there's a number of phases. It'll take a few years to build this project out, but if we get to that point, if there's still only one access point, then we understand what the constraints are with the development for that. This just kind of gives you a better idea of what the development in the area, the development pattern that's going to happen. I've placed in there Valencia Village so that you can see, so our densities are consistent. We believe we have a thoughtful transition from the commercial that's on the northern side of both of those projects. And then an east-west collector that separates the commercial from the multifamily, and then we transition from smaller lots to larger lots. And then as part of our submittal, these are images of the single-family product that we plan to build in the project. We also have images of the 36-foot wide lots, both the front-loaded lots here, as well as our alley-loaded lots. And then the multifamily portion of the site. So there are 3-story buildings, a mix of unit types, and that was all part of our submittal with a clubhouse for the multifamily. And with that,
Good timing.
for any questions.
Thank you. I'll start with my first question is, how long is the entire build-out planned for?
Chairman Zamora, That's difficult for me to answer at this point, just given sales paces and absorptions. I would anticipate that it would be several years. Let's see, we're in 23 now. If it was completed by the end of 2030, potentially. I mean, we're going to start with Valencia, so some of that is dependent on that as well.
And then I guess my follow-up is one of my thought processes when I'm looking at the phasing and kind of reflecting on, like the support letter from our economic development department is, bringing businesses, there, that being the last phase. I understand and I find curious. I think it just makes it a particular challenge because that's an area that needs businesses. I read the different things, the grocery stores, potentially, like, that would be amazing in that area. And to have that last, potentially 7 years from now, just seems a bit slow.
So, Commissioner Zamora, what I can say to that is the phasing line, so we've got the commercial that's in Valencia that would develop first, at least that's our plan. However, if there was a need or a desire to fill that commercial, we've got the infrastructure with Santa Ana as well as the road that will run east-west that connects the two, that could go sooner. The infrastructure will be there because we'll be running the water and sewer lines. It'll all be available. The roadways will be there. So if that had to move up, if we, obviously if we had a big box that wanted to come in, definitely that would be the case. I would anticipate that it's kind of a separate development in that sense. So I wouldn't say that it's not going to happen or it would happen at the end. It could happen sooner if the demand was there.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Other questions for applicant?
So I had
Commissioner Boutros.
I had some similar thoughts about the rezoning for the northern part of the property. My concern comes about, as was said, we really do need the new businesses. It's appropriate for that with the character of Highway 2026. I'm concerned about the application of the PUD and SUP to the entire 118 acres. Currently, I could go along with the commercial development and the multifamily, which is permitted per the HC classification. The highway corridor allows the multifamily housing. South of that, there is where the deviations and waivers are necessary in order to allow that, and I don't like that. The current zoning is R1. I would like to hear a good reason why we should relax that zoning and make the congestion problem worse for no discernible benefit.
Okay.
There was a question in there somewhere.
Thank you. Okay, so I will start, Commissioner Boutros. So what we are requesting is the future land use map amendment for just that northern portion. And then the south of that, of the Madden Spur drain, that's all R2 already. So again, with a PUD, that gives us the opportunity to provide some variation in the lot sizes. We believe that it's reasonable, given its adjacency to what's approved to the west and what would be happening to the north, in terms of the dimensional standards for that. And also, given the scale of the project, just to provide some variety. We understand that there's employment centers close by. Not everybody will be living in a larger home. So we wanted to provide a really balanced mix of product type for this community, and then also to help support the commercial. The more rooftops you have out there, the more viable the commercial pieces will be. we believe that having the multifamily, it's very walkable to get, hopefully to a grocery store or any of the other services that would develop on our commercial site.
For a point of clarity, the comprehensive plan allows medium density, but the zoning is R1 low density, if I'm not mistaken. That's correct.
Chair and Commissioner, that is correct. It is a mixed-use PUD, so it does bump up the allowance for the R1 density to 6 rather than the 3. So they are actually still below that.
Assuming the PUD is approved.
Assuming that, correct.
Additional questions?
I don't think so at this time.
I have a quick one, but it's kind of for staff, Chair. So just for big picture, I think what you have is good. I think the thought is good, and I'm with the Chair on if someone brings in business at the top, if you guys can get that done before you finish building the houses, that would be fantastic. So just from an overview perspective, this is going to be a density of high density because it's 6, which is 4 is above R2. So when we look back at this 2 years from now and it's going to say R1, but really be R3, this is a very difficult question, but is there a way for us to look at it in the future and know that's not actually R1 because that's not R1 density?
Chair and Commissioner, so the PUD will follow along with this. There also will be a development agreement for this property, so that will also follow along with the land if this were to be approved. So it would be stated in there that because of the PUD, they are getting that extra allowance. And again, that DA will stay with the land, so.
I guess my question wasn't clear. If you look at the map and the map is colored for R1, how will I know that that no longer is R1? It's technically R3 by density, not by type, by density.
Chair and Commissioner, I don't know if I have an actual answer to that question. I don't know if there would be. That could be something that potentially is discussed when we go through the comp plan amendment, the big rewrite coming up here. So I can take that back to staff and see if there's anything that we want to think about along those lines.
Okay, because the previous development had the same thing where it's not fair to you guys, but the previous code said it was business, but it's really not. And so from us to try and look at this and go, it says it's R1, but it's really not because of the density, but it's zoned R1 because of a PUD. And so just for future clarity, when we're theoretically gone, that the next person would come in and just be able to look at it and not have a lot of confusion on what it really is. So that was my only question.
Okay, thank you.
And I think you make a,
Commissioner Boutros?
I think, Commissioner Larson, you make a good point about the confusion. There's overlap. There are strange things happening because of where the property lines are or aren't, and what they're able to do within the authority within the authority they have as the owner of the property versus being able to work with adjacent properties. I have a particular heartache with Phase 6 and the fact that there is no secondary access. I think it would be more consistent with how single-family homes are built to not plan on a sprinkler system, which would be different than surrounding homes. That's a very strange thing to see in a residence as a fix, a Band-Aid for not having secondary access. I would like to see Phase 6 delayed until the area around it is built out and a reasonable secondary access could occur. I don't know legally how that works. So we're talking, and we may need to consult with staff on whether it's viable to do that. I think it's important that we get the rezone for the northern part of this done, and because of that, we have to somewhat support this project, but I don't think it's a viable project in its entirety as presented.
Commissioner Boutros, if I may respond to that. So with Phase 6, we are responding to the fire code. And your fire chief has been wonderful to work with, and there have been projects in the past that have been approved that have run up into an issue with access. He's been very forward-thinking on this. Ultimately, we're trying to comply with the fire code. I mean, first option would be, yeah, we have a second access point. The second option, the fire code does allow for us to put sprinklers in the homes to, again, mitigate the life safety concerns that happen in that area. So that's why it's part of our later phase. We understand that that's a constraint on that portion. In terms of the rezone, we had requested the rezone, obviously, for the highway corridor. It seems consistent. Again, this project was annexed 20 years ago. Things were very different out here. The plans have really, really changed. And so we're trying to be consistent with what the city's current and future vision for this area is, and felt that that what we're proposing, we worked with staff initially. We had a very different project that had gone through and was ultimately denied a couple years ago. And so this is the fruits of our labor to go back to the drawing board with staff and say, what do you need? We didn't have commercial before. We had a very different looking project. We feel very good about what we have presented and the hard work that we've had with staff to say, how does this fit into the context of the area and the adjacent properties, and also to acknowledge the growth that's desired in this area. And so from that standpoint, we're making significant infrastructure improvements to the roadways, sewer and water, to develop this area out.
And thank you for that. And I hear you, Commissioner Boutros. And I also I'm looking at the farmland. The open land that's there. The reality is, phase 6. It sounds like it will probably be 6 years from now, and the likelihood that there could be an access point by that point is pretty reasonable if we look at the space that we're talking about, because it's going to be an infill. Nonetheless, I think it sounds reasonable that we rely on our code and on our fire chief, who has that there's a reasonable alternative for that. So I guess that's kind of where my personal stance is with that space. Other questions for Ms. Layton?
Chair, I have one other question, but it's for Rob McDonald, and I don't know if this is even possible, but say they financially could work with the city, would we be able to build a road together to have a secondary access, or is that not that's not a common practice, I'm assuming. So I'm wanting to know what has or could be done, not that it's not basing whether we say yes or no. I just want to know if it's possible.
So what I would tell you, Commissioner, on that is the city would not participate in helping a developer build a road that they need for their development. And that way, the city doesn't have the funding to do that. And this is a development that all the obligations have to be on the back of the developer. We can't have public taxes going to help a developer build their development. So.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
And my last question, I think, for Ms. Layton is around the Highway District letter and the request for the city to ensure that light development, or that light on, was it Midland? I don't have it pulled up, is done beforehand. I guess what would your response be?
Chairman Zamora, members of the commission, ultimately, I would refer back to the traffic impact study and what those requirements were. Not knowing what the timing is for Highway 2026, and that, there's already a level of failure there, we're happy to contribute our proportionate share. To penalize just one development based on something that's already, a deficiency, I don't think that's fair. But Rob, maybe you have a different answer on timing. I mean, we are doing some significant improvements in the area and have every intention of complying with the requirements per the traffic impact study. That was not one that came up in the study for whatever reason. Maybe Rob can speak to that.
Commissioners, I guess what I can add to that is I know that ITD is expediting that section of their 2026. They want to get that built as quick as possible. And I don't remember the dates, but I know that they were proposing to start construction possibly as early as 2024, and maybe it was 2025. I don't know how their project is phased or which sections they're doing first or anything like that. It's a 6-mile stretch of highway between Middleton and Star Road, and so there's some questions there maybe that can be reviewed, or maybe ITD can shed a little bit of light on what the timing is on that. If the majority of the site is taking access, I believe they're taking access out to Middleton, is that correct?
Yeah, Skyway and then up to Santa Ana.
And so there's likely some development that could happen before there's going to be a significant impact over at Midland, because that road is basically, at this point, it's not contiguous with the development. And so I don't really know exactly what to tell you. I do think that it would not be a good idea to add more traffic to Midland. But the way this development's developing, it looks like primarily most of the traffic's going to be on Middleton Road and on Santa Ana. And so I don't know how significant of an impact, if any, there's going to be, especially initially at the beginning of this development in the first couple phases, what that's going to have on the Midland corridor.
This may have been mentioned earlier. Is the intersection of Santa Ana and 2026 going to be signalized?
It will be signalized ultimately, but again, that's part of ITD's project. And that may be something, I know that the mile roads are going to be signalized immediately. The half-mile roads may be signalized as needed or when the traffic demands a signal at those locations. But my understanding is that that is the intent of ITD, yes.
So just as we're having that conversation, I appreciate that feedback. Is potentially if we move forward to approve this, maybe that is we ask staff to make sure we provide that ITD timeline to council, so that the council has, when they make their final decision, has that information available to them on timing so they can make that decision.
Yeah, if it's 2024, I'm pretty at peace with that decision.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys you're not the highway district. So
don't quote me on 2024, please.
2025-ish. If it's 6 years of development, I mean.
So the problem with trying to put a date certain on something like that is it can get out prioritized and shifted further out in time indefinitely until it's firmly funded and work has begun. So this is a challenge for us in trying to predict what's going to happen with traffic around here.
Yeah.
Commissioners, if I may suggest, given the fact that we're starting with Valencia, which will have its own build-out schedule, before we start this project, maybe it's a condition that we, have staff revisit the traffic impact study that we've submitted and if need be, freshen it up at that point. We've done that in other projects where there's a long build-out, and so we do our best to estimate what the impacts are. To your point, there may be some changes. ITD might come through and get this all done, long before, and it'll be a moot point. But I think that would be a reasonable condition is when we get ready to break ground and start development of this. I don't know if, Rob, that would be something that staff would be amenable to, is just looking over the traffic impact study that was submitted and approved as part of this and making sure that that's still valid, and if there's any update that needs to happen, we could do that at that time.
So that's an interesting idea, but we have yet to see any condition written that way.
I think she's proposing that they would be amenable to us
Putting that in as a
adding
condition.
that in, yes.
I just haven't seen anything like that. I don't think that's normally the way planning and zoning works, is it? Have you seen anything like that?
I think certainly we have the prerogative to add that as a condition, right?
Yeah. Can you rearticulate exactly what the condition would be?
I think what I heard Mrs. Layton suggesting is that a condition that upon initially breaking ground on phase one, that prior to that rather, there would be revisited the TIF to ensure its appropriateness at that time.
Okay.
Basically, that engineering staff would have an opportunity to review the traffic impact study, make sure that there isn't something that's come up in the meantime. You know, this is several years out for construction.
Yeah.
Right. And so the commission, what would the consequence be of staff, of engineering staff determining that it was not sufficient? What would then happen?
Well, what I heard Ms. Layton suggest would be that there would make accommodations at that point.
So would the engineering staff then have sort of fiat control over whatever the modification had to be? Would they come back before this commission with staff recommendations to modify the condition? I was wondering how this is practically going to work.
Right. I think you're spot on. I think it would be very difficult to do unless there was some key part of the development that was omitted now and to be added at that time, in which case the developer would have to come before planning and zoning again to get that new parcel approved, and at that time there could potentially be a traffic impact study depending on how big that parcel was.
So this is a practical thought. If we generate too much uncertainty, then all of the components that go into putting a project together, the margins become so wide that it's going to be practically impossible to proceed. I guess a better question for Rob, if he already answered this, I apologize. But if you had to articulate some sort of quantifiable certain thing that could be a triggering event for the desired modification of the improvement, is that something that we could convert to a condition where you say if X, something algebraic, if X then Y, and if Z then Q? I should have started further into the alphabet other than X, because I only have 3 letters to go with, so.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to get at here is, this would require probably a little bit more review of the traffic impact study, but at some point, what we've done in the past is we've allowed certain phases to move forward, but then said, okay, this portion can develop, this portion cannot develop until there's a traffic signal. And so whether the developer wants to build that traffic signal or whether they want to wait until ITD builds the traffic signal, it holds up a part of their development that would have an impact on that intersection, potentially. And so in theory, you could do something like that. I can't articulate here and now what that threshold is, and that would probably take a little bit more research or something to look at. But we could probably have something, I presume we could have something compiled for a city council meeting.
For example, to articulate what I think you're saying, if we were to approve the highway corridor portion of this development and omit the remainder, so omitting the southern 80 acres that is nominally R1, but with deviations and waivers would be quite a bit higher density, we would be able to mitigate potential impacts to traffic. And if that southern portion was made conditional on signalization occurring on Highway 2026 and on secondary access being available to Phase 6, that solves both of those problems.
Commissioner Boutros, I think that would be unfairly overly burdensome of this project if we revert back to what the traffic impact study is telling us. I mean, it's very clear what the impacts are and what the improvements need to be. throughout the life of this project and the ultimate build-out. I mean, I think that's where we really need to start. Maybe it's a condition that we, before we go to council, we work with staff to make sure that that we're looking at the Midland Road 2026 issue. But ultimately, we've submitted this traffic impact study. You know, we spent a lot of time making sure that it was studying what we needed to study. It was trying to offer up a solution, but to put so many more layers that don't align with what the traffic impact study, I think, would be overstepping sort of what the process is and what is recommended in the traffic impact study that was approved and reviewed by staff.
Although if we were to give greater weight to the letter from from Canyon Highway District 4, that poses a greater risk of the entire project being lost, which I don't think we want to do.
No, and again, I would be, you know, I'm trying to come to a solution that if staff wants us to, between now and before we go to council, for Rob to get a good comfort level with that comment from Canyon 4 and making sure that our traffic impact study, it still aligns. Again, we're amenable to that.
The traffic study doesn't align.
Well, and to be fair, I mean, that could be a suggestion in a vote. As an individual person who votes, I'm not in support of that kind of dissection of this project, and I don't know, but I mean, I hear you, and I do think that the reasonable alternative that I heard for this situation, because I do agree that this traffic needs to be addressed, and we want to make sure that we are supporting the development of the city in a mindful manner, but I think that allowing our engineering staff to work with the developer to come up with maybe that trigger point, that Mr. Waterman shared with us, so articulate something so that council can conceptualize that at that point. But I think I'm certainly at this point not in favor of chopping up the proposal that's before us at this moment. And again, I'm one vote, but I do want to make sure that I make my point clear on that. Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, so just another possible thought or suggestion is if you get to build everything and then phase 6 is conditional upon the second access, would you guys be amenable to that kind of a thought? If that were phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7, and then phase 6 could only be developed on condition of a secondary access, would you guys build it or someone else shares the build?
I mean, you're welcome to put that condition on. I think that the fire chief has given a fair option, again, but I mean, if that's a condition that you want to place on that would be something that we would, we may review with council at that time. I'd need to speak with my client, but, I think there's two really viable options, and one of them is, wait till the secondary access or put sprinklers in those homes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions for applicant? We do you have any, there's nobody else that signed up, but Roberto, any final comments that you like?
Yeah, I would like to say, and thank you for that, I did have a neighborhood meeting. We had just a small group, a handful of folks show up. I know that there are neighbors adjacent to us on that eastern parcel that were interested in what we were doing because they're looking at potentially developing their properties and how that could maybe fit in. So there's definitely a lot of thought in the area of this is a transitioning area. We're trying to be part of that long-term plan, and we are creating some very significant infrastructure that will not just support our development, but will also support the entire area. Skyway is a major part of that, frontage improvements along 2026, and Santa Ana coming through there. So with that, I appreciate your time tonight. We believe that this is a great project that will weave into the fabric of the community and will be a great addition to the city of Caldwell, and we request your approval this evening.
Thank you. All right, since that was our version of our rebuttal for this case, I would entertain a motion to close public testimony.
So moved.
There's a motion for Commissioner
Second.
Boutros and a second for Commissioner Larson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Hearing none. All right, let's discuss.
I want to make sure that we're able to...
Speak in the mic, please.
Sorry. I want to make sure we're able to approve the rezone of the commercial section. I understand that when we do that, if it's rezoned as highway corridor, we're accepting the high-density apartments that are immediately south of the commercial section. I am uncomfortable with the deviations and waivers. I think we need to retain the balance of the property only as R1 and not have the deviations and waivers apply to that. I also like the idea of making Phase 6 conditional on the secondary access coming in and not leaving it up to putting sprinklers in. The reason I don't like sprinklers is they are not conventional in residences. There is always a risk of a system failure where sprinklers destroy the inside of a house when there is no fire. The sprinkler option is catastrophic, whether it's inadvertent or whether the sprinklers need to come on for a smoke or fire situation. It's better if we look more like a properly planned community if we ensure secondary access. So I would like that condition on Phase 6.
Help me understand what you're referring to. I'm going to just go back to one of your initial points around the deviations that you're referring to.
Okay. So, as I said, excuse me, as I said earlier, if the PUD and SUP only apply to the northern 39.039 acres, I think that's okay. But the application states that the PUD applies to all 118 acres, and I'm not sure if that's appropriate. The deviations and waivers listed on page 252 of our package should be constrained to the highway corridor rezoned area, not applied to the R1 approximately 80 acres. You could see there is the townhomes with very narrow lot frontages. This is the practical effect of the deviations and waivers. So there's very high density housing. There's inadequate parking right in front of their own residence. The applicant has stated that there's additional parking elsewhere, but it means people have to park somewhere else and walk to their residence. If we deny the deviations and waivers, the applicant will have to replat, and I'm sorry, but and there are going to be different housing unit counts than are currently shown in the application, and that may provide some mitigation of potential traffic problems as well.
So I guess my take on that is when I'm looking at this and our comprehensive plan, and to your point you made earlier, yes, it is zoned as R1 at the moment, but the comprehensive plan has it as R2, and so and then when we add the highway corridor, it feels like the appropriate transitional piece to have that, and it still is retaining the R1 to the east, to that weird portion, that interesting shape. So I guess my concern is that we as a commission are, and I guess, and somebody could correct me if I'm wrong, legal correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, we have a certain amount of authority to do these things, but I think when we start mincing the project up, I think we start usurping the role of the staff, of working with them to dialogue and create a plan that's reasonable, and that supports the infrastructure of the city. In the time I've been on the commission, which has been a while now, I've never seen like the economic development director file a letter of support. So ultimately, I think that this is a really good project, and I am leery of us as a commission taking over the role of staff and start mincing and creating a new project because that's the project that's before us.
So you make a good point, but that then logically leads to remanding the application back to staff to see if they can implement the recommendations that we have. So at the next hearing, bring it back before us in a form that is workable, that avoids the problems that we have identified.
I would think that would be a more logical approach. I don't personally support that still, remanding back to staff. I actually support the plan with a few additions here that we've discussed. But I think that would be a more logical approach than us as a commission of mincing this up as public officials as opposed to planners. And I know we have our respective roles, but I certainly am not a planner. I serve as a role as a public member. Commissioner Larson, you were going to say something earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I think it's mostly good. I think you guys bring great projects to us and good developments that have good intent for Caldwell, looking at the future, looking at the now. Yeah, I mean, I think it's mostly good. The sprinkler thing, it'd be cool if we could have the double, but I'm not a firefighter, and I'm just gonna have to trust Richard Frawley's best judgment on that. I do agree that it probably is, there's possibility to cause damage to all of those homes that are fire sprinkled, but I don't install fire sprinklers either, so I'm like kind of willing to lean on our fire department to trust their better judgment. Yeah, my only concern is that we just make sure the business at the the northern portion is successful, because I think houses are going to develop whether you guys develop them or someone else comes. My future and hope is to make sure all of the businesses that want to come here succeed. I was just talking to some people the other day. The Nampa Costco was supposed to come where the DMV is right now in Caldwell, and the previous city council shot it down. So my thought is I would rather put more effort on developers who are trying to give us good businesses than taking the kind of bad portion. If you're going to say it, phase 3, I'm willing to take those lumps for the greater good of Caldwell.
I would say, here's my suggestion I could throw out to the commission, so that we would approve it with the conditions presented, plus I have a couple others that I was capturing. One would be that prior to appearing before council, that the developer works with our engineering staff to come up with a more comprehensive response to traffic in that specific area, which it would include incorporating ITD's timing, because I think that might mitigate some of our concern if we just know that ITD's time frame is sooner, right? So kind of layering in that as one potential condition. The other is, I guess I kind of wrap those two up into the same time. And additionally, I don't know if we can condition it, but certainly make a strong recommendation that we develop the commercial portions as soon as possible, as soon as reasonable. I think that is something, for me, that makes this particularly interesting, given that area and that piece. And so I would highly recommend and request that commercial piece is expedited, whatever that looks like with the developer and the economic development team. So those are a couple of my suggestions. So approving with those additional conditions / recommendations. And I see you have a point of clarification.
Yeah, just to clarify. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Chair, I was just talking with legal, and we're looking at condition 11 to address where it says proposed fire suppression, to change it to shall provide fire suppression, just so that there's more clarification within that condition.
Versus, tell me what it
Propose.
says. Okay. Commissioner Larson.
Yeah, Chair. Staff, historically have we, I guess this is kind of just a point of clarification for me and the other council members. If they have 7 phases, that's mostly just for us to know what they're trying to do. Legally, they don't have to start at 1 and end at 7. They can do 1, 3, 4, 6.
Chair and Commissioner, Based on recent discussion, and interpretation of our current code, you do have to be, in successive, continuation, 1 through 7.
So then I guess my only question is for the business portion, say they get big box to come in and a big box retail says we will build, if we say there's a condition to, if a business comes in, no matter what phase you are in the process, you have, flexibility to start that development next instead of going into the next sequential order? Is that?
Sorry, Commissioner, I don't exactly understand help me
So-
understand the concern.
The question is, I believe it's phase 7. If phase 1 starts developing and then a business comes in and says, we want to build here, they have flexibility to go straight to 7 and don't have to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or if they're at phase 2 and then someone comes in, they can go straight to 7 or 3 or 4, wherever they're at.
So just for additional clarification, phase 7, which is the final phase, is where the commercial is currently slated.
Right. So, I don't know of a way, the point of phasing is to limit infrastructure investment, before you get to final plat, right? So if you've got a large development like this one, the developer doesn't want to have to install phase 7 infrastructure prior to, when they're only able to turn around and sell something in phase 1, because the cost would be exorbitant. So it gets broken up. You do your phase 1 preliminary plat obligations, you get your final plat for that, and you move on. And I'm sure I'm telling you things you already know. I think that I am unaware of, I think a preliminary plat amendment could be sought if there actually is in fact somebody interested in building in what is phase 7. That in theory is going to be a very profitable enterprise, and so a plat amendment could be sought in that circumstance. But the alternative would be to say, well, it has to be in phase 1, but that would require that all the infrastructure in that phase 7 be constructed at phase 1. So I think that the market forces in general remedy, if an owner of land is in a circumstance where somebody wants to buy or develop some very expensive thing in some phase of their plat that's a few phases out, there are courses that they can chart to get that amended or updated to permit them to move there first. The city would not need to prod them to do that. The market's going to do that all by itself.
I think I heard you say that the phasing protects the developer from having to prematurely install infrastructure. But if the developer desires to add the infrastructure sooner because they have someone coming in who wants to use the commercial, is there anything legally that would stop them from doing that?
Well, no, nothing will legally stop them from installing the infrastructure. The question will be, can they get the final plat out of sequence, right? So the developer is certainly free to go install all their infrastructure right at the beginning, and seek their final plats as rapidly as they would choose. But again, and at this point we've added enough substance to this conversation that I recommend that you have the applicant come back, and I think that maybe the applicant sort of gravitated to the mic preemptively on that front. But
it seems like it would be a pro forma process at that point where everyone is in agreement that the plat amendment is necessary, the developer is asking for the plat amendment. Why wouldn't it be granted?
Yeah, I don't know of any reason why it wouldn't be. The circumstance that's would produce tension is if the project was in reverse sequence, where there was something the city had a high value on in an early phase and low value end phases, and that preliminary plat amendment or modification application might hit some resistance. But again, I don't think there is any impediment to, if there's a big box that wants to come in, the dollars will be sufficient to motivate a preliminary plat modification. And I'm not sure how P&Z handles preliminary plat modifications when final plats have been issued for prior phases and there's no longer unity of ownership, I'm assuming that the modification is just to the subsequent, to the future phases. But anyway, at this point, I think that probably would be best served by letting the applicant provide some commentary.
Do we have to reopen public testimony?
Yeah, for the purpose of the record, you can. There's no one else here to rebut or comment, but alternatively, if the applicant can always talk to staff, and you can still ask staff questions. So it may be the case that the applicant prefers that staff respond, in which case we don't have to reopen public testimony at all.
Doug, I can just comment that, Commission, excuse me, I should be addressing you, not. This is a fairly common practice. You get these mixed-use developments, and they don't know when the commercial's going to develop because it's all market-driven. Yeah. We went through this quite a bit on North Ranch. They platted the entire North Ranch development, and then you're getting development kind of scattered all over the place, and so they were doing preliminary plat amendments to accommodate that. And so I don't see that. The city wants to see development come in on the corridor, and if there's, if the developer has someone that's interested in developing that, the city has mechanisms to be able to facilitate that, and it's not gonna jeopardize the development. Otherwise, the city wouldn't allow it. But there are ways to work around that and navigate that through preliminary plat revisions. So.
Okay. Thank you. Does that helps answer my question. So there's a mechanism to allow it to happen.
Yeah, as long as you're saying it's an easy, repeatable process that's happened historically in the past and will keep happening in the future, then that seems super reasonable. They could just come back and change it instead of us to make a very complicated exception. Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I'm still unhappy with the deviations and waivers being applied to the southern 80 acres. I am still not happy about adding fire suppression systems in residence. I've had my say.
Further discussion?
No, I don't think so.
All right. If not, I would entertain a motion. And I have some notes. I would be willing to make said motion. So based upon the testimony and evidence in record in this manner, finding and upon the findings of fact and the conclusions of law set forth herein, do hereby determine and move as follows. The request CPM 23-4 for a comprehensive plan amendment on the northern 39.039 acres the subject parcel from low-density residential to highway corridor to include approval of Resolution 97-23 is approved, subject to the conditions as presented, in addition to amending the current listed condition number 11, changing the word proposed to the phrase shall provide, in addition to a condition in where the developer works with the engineering staff to address traffic, including the ITD timing prior to city council hearing. And the request for zoning 23-4 to rezone the northern 39.039 acres from R1 low-density residential to highway corridor is approved, subject to the conditions as previously presented, and the request for PUD 23-01 to allow for a mixed-use PUD, including a housing variety and 9 commercial lots, is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions as previously presented, and request for SUB 23-13 to allow for a preliminary plat is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions of approval as previously presented.
Second.
So there's a second for Commissioner Larson. Roll call.
Zamora.
Yes.
Larson.
Yes.
Boutros.
No.
With that, motion carries. There was the majority of the commission present. And so with that, we'll go ahead and close public hearing for this action item, which leads us to our last and final thing, which is adjournment. And so with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So moved.
Motion from Commissioner Larson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Boutros. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, meeting adjourned.